What is piece rate pay? Well, piece rate pay is a system that calculates employee pay based on a completed task for a lump sum of money. So instead of, say, paying $18 per hour until the job is done, you pay $1,000 for a completed job. What I like the most about the piece rate system is it reverses the track in which the communication goes from the salesperson or the owner of the company to the crew, and it reverses that so the crew has to give feedback to the salesperson and the owner. So if a project is bid for 100 hours, the owner, salesperson, project manager, whoever's in charge of the project, they want to do everything they possibly can to make sure that the crew is working that job under 100 hours, which oftentimes takes a lot of effort on an hourly pay system because the crew doesn't have any incentive to get the job done faster. With a piece rate system, you're reversing that. So if a job is bid for 100 hours, they want to do everything they possibly can to get it done under that 100-hour mark because they're going to get paid more per hour. Now, if a job for some reason is not bid correctly, that crew lead is going to let you know. They're going to say, hey, this job was bid under, we need more hours for this project. Now, they have every incentive that they possibly could need to get it done in under 100 hours. So if they end up taking 110 or 120 hours and it's not on a consistent basis, you usually know that they were working hard, the project was managed correctly, and it's probably the fault of the salesperson. And if you're paying based on a gross profit, that salesperson now is making less of a commission because you have to chew into some of that gross profit to pay your crew more than what you would usually pay them because it was misbid. So I think that by reversing the communication, it aligns the incentives with the company and also with the employees to have a healthier business. So with that said, we're just going to go through a quick example of processing a job using the piece rate system. So we're going to put a customer's name in here for, say, Joe Smith. Leave the date as is. The lead generator was the company. We're going to say the job was bid for 100 hours. The salesperson was Alyssa. Project manager was Richard. The job type, let's say, was cabinet painting, and we had a material cost of $600. The crew received a quality score of a 5 for all attributes, and then they also received a Google review. So this system calculates a bonus based on that, and they got $72 or 3 extra hours of pay. This can be adjusted if you need to. We go down to the payout section. We have 4 payouts, but if a project was completed within 1 pay period, it's completed in the first payout. We have the bonus hours, which we're going to get added in here of 3, so it's 103 hours of pay. We have a labor budget of $24 an hour, which we can get into more details about that later in the video. We're going to say it was completed in 1 pay period. We had, let's say, Leo and Tony on the job. They had each worked 45 hours. And what that means is that Tony, even though he worked the same number of hours as Leo, would make $1,095 or $24 per hour. And Leo, as a craftsman, would make $20.69 per hour. These experience levels can be adjusted, and we have 5 different levels for our painting company. You can adjust those however you see fit. Let's say, for example, that he was instead paired with Adam, who was an apprentice. That would be a first level. That brings Tony's pay up to $25.73 an hour, and then Adam would get paid $19.30. So the pay gets adjusted based on the experience level. So that's how one piece rate pay system works in a nutshell. Now let's give you a quick look at the commission and job costing sheet. So a lot of this information just gets pulled over from the piece rate sheet automatically. You really only have these 3 cells that you have to adjust, which would be the gross sale, if you paid any sales up front to your salesperson, and then whether or not the job was subcontracted. And then based on that, it's going to calculate how much the salesperson made. So in this case, it was $446. How much the project manager made. So in this case, it was $297. We can process a job as being subcontracted or piece rate system. So if it's subcontracted for our company, we just pay a total lump sum as a percentage of the total revenue. Versus the piece rate system, is obviously calculated a little bit differently. So down here, it's going to show our job gross profit if it was employees versus if you select subcontractor. It's going to change that. It's going to blank this all out, and it's going to give you what your job gross profit was if it was subcontracted. But we're going to leave that as employees for now. And then we'll scroll down. It's going to give you your lead commission. So if you paid out one of your employees or somebody, you can set a pay rate, and then you can pay them for that using the system. Your salesperson, their commission rate is 15% of the gross profit. You can also set that up to be as a percentage of the net profit if you'd like to do that instead. Same as the project manager commission. And then down here you have your overhead or what your projected overhead goals are for that year. So it's going to tell you subcontracted versus employee, your total revenue goals for the year, and what your projected overhead is going to be for that year. And at the bottom here, it's going to add up your cost of goods sold and your overhead expense to give you a projected net profit. So in this case, it would be 16.5%. So these two sheets are the two sheets we for sure use the most in our system to kind of calculate how well the business is doing on a week-to-week basis. But you also need additional areas, which we can get into more detail later, but this is going to cover the overtime sheet, which you'll need to use if you do have employees that end up working overtime. Your data sheet, where you're going to set up your company more or less, you're going to set up your job types, the experience levels and the weight of those experience levels, your charge rate, your labor budget, your subcontractor pay, your operational burden. Some of these items you're going to need to get entered in for the system to work for you. And then you're going to want to enter in all your employees, your salespeople, and this is a sales compensation calculator that you can use to figure out how much you want to pay that person as a salary and their commission percentage. Same for your project managers. You have the option to kind of configure this in a way where it's going to work best for you and for your project managers. And then you have your area for your overhead. To get that calculated year over year, and then what your projection is for the current year. And then as a bonus, we also have an ad budget calculator. So that's going to take historical marketing data, and it's going to combine that with this year's current goals as far as your sales go and where you want to allocate funds for marketing. So if you've gotten to the point where you think that this is something interesting and maybe you've downloaded the spreadsheet, now we're going to get into how to set this up for your company. So you've already got it downloaded. What is your first thing you want to do? Well, the first thing you want to do is create a backup of this sheet, just in case you end up accidentally changing one of the formulas. You can always revert back to that backup. So you just do File, make a copy, name it as your backup, and store it somewhere within your Google Drive in a safe place that you can refer back to. And now we're going to head over to the Data tab and get this set up for your company. So the first area you want to adjust is the hourly labor budget. We have a charge rate of $60 per hour in this example, with a labor budget percentage set at 40%, which means that our labor budget per hour is $24, including the burden. If you wanted to say change that to $70 per hour and you're keeping your labor budget percentage at 40, then you're going to be at $28 per hour is what your labor budget allows for. As far as subcontractor pay, you just enter in the percentage of the pay that you typically pay your subcontractors. In this case, it's 60%. So you charge $1,000, the subcontractor gets 60% of that, and you can include or exclude materials depending on how you have it set up with your subcontractor. And then for us, we also have an overhead adjusted rate. So we have a hybrid business model where we have both employees and we have subcontractors, and our employees take a lot more overhead for us to supply them with tools and materials and everything that they need versus the subcontractor is responsible for all those things. So at the end of the day, a subcontractor's gross profit is a little bit less, but the net profit is pretty much the same as an employee-based crew. So we artificially adjust the gross profit because we pay a salesperson and a project manager based on gross profit. So we kind of artificially adjust those numbers up a little bit to get them closer to what it would be if it was an employee-based crew that does that job. See, we don't want to get in a situation where a salesperson sells a job, and depending on who the job is completed by, influences how much the salesperson makes. We want a salesperson to make the same amount pretty much no matter what, unless they haven't measured correctly or they didn't sell the job correctly, but not because it's done by a subcontractor crew or an employee crew. So the next area that you want to adjust is the experience, weight, and pay rate. So again, these areas in blue, any area in blue is an area that you're likely going to need to change. Any area in green is something that you probably won't need to change. So this has a formula attached to it that's going to figure it out based on your weighted percentage. So a team lead, you're saying, is making 100%. So our labor budget per hour is $24. When you take out the burden of 22%, that means that your payout to that employee, if they were bid for 1 hour work, the job was bid for 1 hour work and they got it done in 1 hour, they would make $19.67. When we run down the weighted average, that just means that that person at that experience level is making 75% of that 1967. So an apprentice, first level apprentice, is making about $15 an hour. And your goal, and the apprentice's goal, is to work their way up to a team lead position where they're going to be getting paid more as a percentage of the total labor budget. So you can adjust this however you see fit, and you can also adjust the percentages. You can also reduce the amount, there's 5 levels here. You can make it 3 levels or increase the number of levels if you'd like. Next area is the job types. We own a painting company, so these are our job types. You're going to want to check. You can keep this just to one job type if you want to make things less complicated. Personally, we like to have a crew set aside for doing cabinets and another crew set aside for doing exterior painting, and pretty much just keep them on those types of projects. However, let's say that an exterior painter wanted to learn how to do cabinet painting. Well, they're going to kind of start at the beginning as far as the experience level. They might start at like a craftsman 1 and try to work their way up. But if they're a team lead, then they're not going to be a team lead over on the cabinet painting side, because they have to kind of get their feet wet and figure out how to paint cabinets, because it's a completely different type of service. So that's why we have different job types, is because there are different experience levels associated with each job type. Then you have your operational burden. So this is going to be your payroll tax, your workman comp, your unemployment. If you have health insurance, 401k, all of that stuff you want to put into your operational labor burden, so you can figure out how much it's going to cost you per hour to pay that employee. And that's going to be taken out of this figure right here, remember. So we're not actually budgeting $24 per hour to pay the employee. It's $24 as a cost to the company. And then you also have your sales burden. So sales burden just basically, you might have a little bit of a different burden set up because the work comp is going to be less. So in our situation, our work comp burden is 3% versus for an operational person is 12%. So you're going to want to get that adjusted as well, so that your salesperson or project manager get paid more. If you go over to the piece rate sheet, you see a labor budget per hour, $24. You go back to our data sheet, it's also $24. If we change our charge rate to $75 an hour, which increases our labor budget to $30, the piece rate system is going to automatically change that for you. Now let's head over to the All Personnel tab. And you're going to want to input all of your employees here. You also want to put company in at the end here. That's important because you have an area set up for the lead. Whoever the lead gets assigned to, and in most cases it's the company. You can decide whether or not they're an employee. For all of the operational people, they're likely going to be employees. Project manager or a salesperson, I suppose, could be a subcontractor. So we do have the option in here for you to select whether or not they're an employee or a subcontractor. If they're a subcontractor, then it's not going to take the burden out of their pay. And then you have your different types. Now these are going to automatically change depending on what you put in here for your data. So whatever types you put in here are going to get reflected over here. And then you're going to also select the experience level of that employee for that type. So go through and set up all your employees, set up the types of work, and set up their experience level for each type. If you scroll down here, this is an area that you may want to change. We just have the different experience levels and what kind of the goals are for that person, and what they need to work on in order to achieve that level, or what they have accomplished in order to get to that level. So it's just important to kind of have a written out plan for them. Okay, so this next section right here is really no different than the data section over here. The main difference, the main reason why we have this available here is because this sheet entirely we make available to our employees. See, the piece rate sheet right here gets published as a web hyperlink, and we make this piece rate available to our employees. This hyperlink right here is something that they can click on, so they can always go back to this sheet and review what the piece rate system is all about and make sure that they're comfortable with it. I would also suggest, if you're switching from an hourly system over to a piece rate system, that you kind of walk through each one of your employees through this so that they're comfortable with it. I think after they figure out what they could make versus what they're making right now, they'll be on board. The next area I wanted to talk about is this job training section right here. Setting a person up as job training for their experience level is really important for the piece rate system to be successful. It's one of the most important things. The reason why is because when you have a person that's first starting to work for your company, they're probably not worth $15, $16 an hour if they don't have any experience at all. However, it's really hard in this environment to hire anybody for less than $15 an hour. So this sets it up so that their actual production worth, I guess, or the percentage of their weighted percentage is 50%, which means that they're getting paid $9.84. That's going to bring the piece rate value down as far as a percentage of the total job down $9.84 by all the hours that they work. So they are contributing a little bit as far as the production goes on the job. They're just not contributing nearly as much as, say, a craftsman level 1. So what we do at the end of a 2-week period, or at the end of their training period, is we take the total number of hours that they work and we just multiply it by $15 an hour. And then we start them into the piece rate system after that. So if they had worked $80 or 80 hours, they would make $80 times $15 instead of the $9.84. So what we've discovered is that most people want to get out of that job training section right away because they want to make more than $50 an hour. So they have a lot of incentive to improve, which means that it helps the team lead or the craftsman or whoever else is assigned to that job, because that person, that new hire is working as hard as they can. So they're helping as much as they can, which is going to help the wages of the team lead and the craftsman. So we have 2 examples that I'm going to show you right now. For each one of these examples, the projects are 100 hours. We have a labor budget per hour of $24, so that gives us a total labor budget of $2,400. With the burden taken out, we have $1,967 total pay that we have allotted for the crew. So we have a team lead and an apprentice for this job. They each work 50 hours, so they met the budget. We first have to figure out what their pay is with their weighted scale before we figure out the piece rate. So the team lead, again, is making $1,967, and an apprentice is at $1,475 per hour. The total pay is $983, $737 for the apprentice. The percentage of pay is 57 versus 42. The total pay is $1,721, and that is before the piece rate system is figured out. Now, we have promised our employees that we're going to pay them $1,967 as a total. So a team lead makes 57% of the $1,967, or $1,124, and that equals out to $2,250 an hour. Same applies for the apprentice. Now in example number 2, we're going to say that we have 2 team leads and they each worked 50 hours. So their weighted average is $1,967. So they're getting paid $1,967 for this job, or $983. Our assumption is that if you have 2 team leads working together, they're going to complete that job much faster than a team lead and an apprentice. So let's say that they completed this job in more like 45 or 40 hours each, let's say. So in that scenario, they're going to make $24.60 an hour, $983 as a total. Let's say that you had a team lead and an apprentice each work 40 hours. So same number of hours. Now that team lead is making $28.10 an hour and the apprentice is making $21 an hour. So if a team lead and an apprentice have performed similar to these two, who are both team leads, that means that this apprentice is, or maybe the team lead, is way overperforming compared to two team leads over here, which is why the team lead would get paid $28.10 an hour. And also why an apprentice will get paid $21 an hour. So we can either attribute that to the team lead being a really good leader, or maybe the apprentice is a really hard worker, but as a team, as a unit, they're doing really well together. So you might wonder why in this scenario, if they each work 50 hours and their weighted pay scale is 1475 versus 1967, but they met the budget, why are they making more than their weighted average? Well, the reason why is because we have a weighted pay top end of 1967. For every hour that we bill the customer, we can pay $19.67. However, an apprentice is weighted at $14.75. So we have about $5 of room in there. So if we've met the budget, then that extra $5 for every hour that they work, so that'd be 5 times 50, about $250, gets distributed amongst the team lead and the apprentice. So again, we're just attributing that to, hey, these guys met the budget and we have a team lead working with a new apprentice. So that means that they're doing really well. Team lead's being a great leader, or the apprentices were really hungry to learn and working really hard. So, they get compensated based on that. So our assumption would probably be more along the lines of these two maybe going a little bit over budget. So if they went a little bit over, let's say they went 10 hours over budget, then that hourly rate for that team lead is getting closer to that weighted pay scale. And then the apprentice's hourly rate is also getting closer to their average pay scale. So it's good to show your employees what this is like. And you can also take a couple of previous jobs and say, okay, you made $20 an hour on these last 4 projects. Here's what it would have been like if you would have done the piece rate system. Not to mention, now you also have incentive to get these jobs done faster. So you're probably going to make more per hour than you would have made on an hourly rate. So you're going to want to kind of walk your employees through these two examples. So now we're going to move on to the salespeople. So this is where this top section right here is where you're going to enter all your salespeople. So you'll select your salesperson, and then you're going to select drop downs for their salary, their biweekly salary, salaried weeks, and so on and so forth. This data right here is going to be dependent upon what you set up down below here for the sales compensation calculator. So it's going to be dependent on their quota, their sales goal, and what kind of salary that you pick for that person. And then you have your company set up and how you pay your salespeople. So in this situation, you're paying 15% of the gross profit. You could select net profit instead, or net sale instead. And then you're going to want to enter in your average gross profit if you're paying as a percentage of your gross profit. And then if you're paying for leads as well to your employees or salespeople, you're going to enter in how much or what percentage you're going to pay. So in this situation is 2.7%, and we pay of the net sale. Now down below here, you have your sales quota, the sales goal, the quota reducer, the close rate, that's the average close rate that your company experiences throughout the year, and then the average job size throughout the year. And then you have your total number of salaried pay periods. This data right here is just going to show you, based on what you enter up here, what you need to be able to do in order to hit these numbers. So you need a total of 244 jobs, at an average job size of 4,094 to hit your $1 million goal. You need 4.7 jobs per week for 548 appointments, total appointments, 10.54 appointments per week, and $19,000 in sales per week. Now remember, we've set our payout commission to 15% of the gross profit. So if you see here, best case scenarios, you find a salesperson that wants to make 100% commission. And if you set a sales quota of $600,000 for a minimum baseline, at 15%, that means the total cost of the company can be $45,000. That's roughly going to be 7.5% of the gross sale. What this also means is that if you're going to pay somebody a salary, their salary plus their commission can't really be above that $45,000 mark. It will be above that $45,000 mark or 7.5% if you paid them the salary and they haven't met their quota. So let's say they only sell them $400,000. You finish their number of pay periods for that salary, and they haven't sold that total of $600,000. So it's going to end up costing you, instead of 7.5%, it might cost you 9 or 10%. Now we could talk about this reducer and how it affects your calculations here. So your best case scenario, again, is a salesperson that wants to make 15% commission, 100% commission. Now, there is going to be some risks to the company if a salesperson wants to take on a salary. And to mitigate some of that risk, or try to incentivize a salesperson to take a 100% commission, we have the salary reducer. So it's going to reduce their commission percentage by 0.6 per level. So if they have a $20,000 salary, they're going to instead make 13.2% after they've met their quota, versus 15% across the board if they didn't want to take a salary at all. And what that means is that at the end of the year, if they sold $1 million, that person with that, say, $20,000 salary is going to get paid $51,400 in total commission, or total pay would be $63,000, versus somebody with a 15% and zero salary is going to make $66,000. So they're going to make a few $1,000s more per year. And the reason why we do that, again, is just to incentivize people to want to take 100% commission pay versus some salary, because there is some risk if a salesperson takes a salary and they don't meet their quota. The two data points that you really want to focus on when you're setting this up for a salesperson are your sales quota and the total number of salary pay periods, assuming that you are going to pay this person a salary. So if your sales quota is set up where it says $600,000, well, the assumption is that most salespeople, most, say, first-year salespeople, could complete $600,000 in 6 months. Well, you want to set your salary pay periods to be somewhat equal, if not a little bit beyond the point in which they've reached their sales quota. You don't want to go under it necessarily, because what's going to happen is for 15 pay periods, you're going to give that person a salary. Let's say you're paying them $20,000 or roughly $1,200 every 2 weeks. That's going to run out after 15 pay periods. So if they haven't reached their sales quota, they're still going to be stuck at this 8.33% commission until they've reached their sales quota, and it jumps up to 13.2%. So instead of going maybe a little bit short of that, maybe you're going to go to like 20 weeks. We'll see what that does to the numbers here. So that's going to reduce the salary every 2 weeks, but it's going to extend it to 20 weeks. So it's going to give them 20 weeks to at least hit that sales quota of $600,000. And then at that point, their salary or their commission is going to jump up substantially to 13.2%. Now you can see that we have a gap between the sales quota and the sales goal of about $400,000. This term right here could also be considered to be your sales minimum, what that person needs to sell in order to pay back their salary, assuming that they do have a salary. This number, again, doesn't mean anything if somebody wants to make 100% commission. But let's say, for instance, that we're going to boost this sales minimum or quota up to $1 million. What this means is that they're making the highest end commission really right off the get-go. From the first sale to the last sale that they have in that year, they're going to be making 13%. So if they don't sell $1 million, then it's going to cost you considerably more than what you've budgeted. So in this situation, we budgeted for 15% of the gross profit, or 7.5% of the gross sale. So if they don't sell that $1 million, it's going to cost us more than that. So you want to set your minimum, your sales quota minimum, much less than that. You want to have a gap, say of 600,000 again. That's going to lower the percentage that they're going to make up until they've reached that quota. And it also means that if they've taken a salary, they've paid back that salary at that $600,000 mark. And then once they've gotten past that mark, then they start making a higher commission. Now, let's say we have a last scenario where we have to max out our risk. We really need to hire a salesperson and we need to offer them the best compensation package that we possibly can. Reduce most of the risk for the salesperson. So in that scenario, you're going to increase your sales quota or the minimum to probably close to what you think they can probably sell in a year. So let's just say it's $1 million. As a sales goal, you can boost that up. It's not really going to change their compensation too much. It's just going to show them basically what they can make if they do make that sales goal. So let's just say it's at $1,400,000. And then the total number of salaried pay periods, we're just going to increase that to the maximum amount. So they're getting a salary all year round, 26 pay periods. So in that scenario, they're going to get $1,360 every 2 weeks. They're going to get paid 7% commission before they've met their quota. And then they're also going to get a bump to 10.8%. Now you're under the assumption that it's going to be very hard for them to get to $1.2 million. $1 million is kind of the maximum amount that you can see a salesperson. But if they happen to get to $1.4 million, then that person is going to end up making $85,000 in salary. Okay, so why don't we go through this calculator as if we're hiring a salesperson? We don't need to change any of this. That's how our company is set up and how we're going to pay out a salesperson. But we're going to set a sales quota of $750,000. We're going to set a sales goal of $1.2 million. Our total number of salaried pay periods is going to be 13. And what we're going to do is we're going to pay this salesperson $20,000 salary, or $17,699. They have a potential to make $76,000, assuming they hit their sales goal. So we'll go up here to the employee area, and we're going to hire Richard. And Richard is going to make a salary of $17,699, biweekly salary of, I think it was $1361. Total number of salaried weeks is going to be 13. Their quota is 750,000. If they're under quota, what is the percentage that they're going to make? 9.67%. And then if they go over their quota, they're going to make 13.2%. Their current sales level, we just hired them, so they're under quota. So that means that their current compensation is 9.67%. And they're set up. So if the job gets processed in the piece rate system, and the salesperson changes from Alyssa to Richard instead, then that commission is going to get plugged into here. So when you pay that salesperson their commission, it's going to change from Alyssa, who opted in for a 15% full commission, is going to change to the commission that Richard wanted, which was the 9.67%, because they are taking a salary. So moving on to the project manager sheet, the calculator for the project manager is really the same as the salesperson. The difference for us and how we set up our project manager's commission is it's going to be 10% instead of 15% like we pay a salesperson. The assumption is that a project manager is going to be able to manage probably twice as much as a salesperson can sell. So they're going to be able to manage at least 2 salespeople's worth of jobs in a year. So they're probably going to make roughly what a salesperson does make if they're a good project manager. But again, you would just set this up exactly the same as you would set it up for a salesperson. And in this situation, we would have Richard as our project manager. He didn't opt in for any salary, so that means that he's going to make that maximum amount of commission right off the bat. The difference between a salesperson and a project manager in terms of salary goes is that a project manager is going to get paid immediately, because if you're paying based on the gross profit, you're getting jobs done right away. Versus a salesperson, if your pipeline is out 2 months or 3 months, they may not see any of their commissions for 2 or 3 months. So that's why you might want to pay them a salary for 3 or 4 months or whatever you want to pay them, to kind of get them by so that they start experiencing their commissions through the pipeline. But a project manager, it isn't totally necessary because they're going to get commissions right away. And if you have a bunch of projects in your pipeline, you have that security for them. You can just show them your schedule and say, hey, look at all these jobs that we got. You're going to get paid a commission right away. So why not just make the maximum amount of commission that you can make? So that's kind of the difference for us, at least, as far as the project manager compensation. Now we'll move on to the overhead sheet. So the overhead sheet has a projection for this year's overhead and your revenue goals for whether you have subcontractors or employees. And it also has this bottom area for your last year's numbers. You can include multiple years if you want. You just have to copy and paste this block of cells so you can keep track of what your overhead expense is year over year. But you're going to want to use last year's numbers to make a projection of what your numbers are going to be this year for your overhead. Now, this area over here might be a little bit unique to our business. It's because we have a hybrid model with both employees and subcontractors, but we do assign some of our overhead expenses specifically to employees. So our assumption is that if we were a 100% subcontractor model, we're not going to have employee training. We're not going to have payroll processing fees. We're not going to have team meetings and shop and vehicle maintenance or auto depreciation or lease because of all the tools and equipment and vehicles that we buy for our employees. So if we had 100% subcontractor model, our business total overhead would probably be something more along the lines of 23% versus employees, it's more along the lines of 34, 35%, difference of about 10.6%. The reason why that number is important to us is because we're paying our subcontractors or we're paying our project managers and salespeople based on the gross profit. So we want to know how much we can artificially boost up that gross profit to pay that project manager or salesperson. So let's say, for instance, that we want to deselect this area right now. It's currently assigned to all employees as a percentage of the overhead. So it's 1.14%. But if we deselect that, it's going to go to 0.59% and also 0.59% for subs. So let's say that you just had 100% employees or 100% subcontractors, or you didn't want to kind of split it up this way. You just deselect all of these boxes and it's going to assign all of the overhead to both sides of the business, so 29.3% across the board. So we'll get into setting up your goals for current year. So last year you did $400,000 in sales for a subcontractor. You're going to try to do $750,000, meaning you're going to hire a couple new subcontracting crews. That's going to be an 87% increase for subcontractors. Employees are going to go from 660 to 810, roughly a 22% increase. So that means that your total revenue is going to increase by about 47%. So this overhead helper right here is kind of key because what you're going to do is you're going to take last year's numbers. So team meetings, shop and vehicle maintenance. We have that assigned to an employee-based crew and it's $7,500. So the revenue type will be employee. So that's going to be a 22% increase from last year. So if we had $7,500 in there, it's going to tell us what the projected expense is going to be. So it's $9,204. So we put that in right here. So we have an overhead expense of 34% for an employee crew and 23% for a sub crew. Now, if we go over to commission and job costing, we'll see how that affects the net profit. This job is processed as piece rate, so it's done by our employees. If we go down below, the overhead expense is 34.48%, same as what we have over here from the overhead sheet. So whatever our overhead ends up being right here, that's what's going to show up right here. So our total expenses are $55.12, net profit $1,087, or roughly 16.47%. So now let's say that this job was instead processed as a subcontracting crew. So we'll say, yes, it was a subcontracted crew. Now it says that we have material cost here of $600, but for subcontractors, they have to pick up materials. So we're going to say that's zero. And then we'll go down below to see what the overhead expense is. It's 23%. Again, that's what it is over here on the overhead sheet, 23%. And then it sets that money aside, adds up the total expenses. Net profit is roughly the same, whether it's a subcontracted crew or it's an employee-based crew, leaving us a net profit of 16.17%. So one of the nice things about this sheet is you can sort of just play with the numbers and see where you end up for your net profit. Let's say, for instance, that you want to change the labor percentage that you're going to pay out. See how that's going to affect your net profit. It would be at 35%. Go back to commission and job costing. See if this is subcontracted. No. $600 was the material cost. Go back down. So we went from 16% up to a 21% net profit. It's a pretty big improvement, roughly 4 or 5%. You can also say change how much your overhead is for your sales. Say maybe you're going to pay less than 7.5%, or project manager, or you're going to change the amount of money that you're going to spend on advertising. Of course, you got to be careful with that, because if you have goals set for certain revenue, you may not hit those goals if you lower your advertising costs. But you can play with these numbers however you see fit to end up at a net profit that works for you. So now we're going to head over to the next sheet, which is the ad budget calculator. This sheet is really designed to help you decide where to spend money and where to allocate funds for your marketing budget for the next year, so you can get your overhead right on the advertising side of things. You have this bottom area that has your historical marketing data from all your previous years. And then you have this top area that helps you input your historical marketing data and figure out what you're going to spend this year based on your revenue goals. So any area that is green is an area that has a formula attached to it, and it's going to give you a number or a percentage based on what you input in the blue area for your marketing sources. So going down below, any of these areas, this sheet isn't going to find out what you spend, or it's not going to keep track of what you spend or your leads, your acquired customers. You need to use a CRM or some kind of customer relationship management, or you could even use Google Sheets. But you're going to want to figure out how many calls you're getting from that source, what you're spending on it, and then how many acquired customers that you have from that source. So we use a CRM called Zoho. It's a fairly inexpensive software. We'll put a link in the description below to Zoho. But basically, every time you get a lead in, or you have a customer fill out a contact form, you need to make sure that they can fill out where they found you from. And then you got to keep track of how much money you're spending on that source. So you can get all this inputted in here, so you can accurately allocate funds to the most profitable advertising sources. So this is all example data, but we're putting this in here based on what we had spent last year. So word of mouth. Word of mouth is a very inexpensive way of advertising, obviously, but that takes time. If you're a new business, you're not going to get a lot of word of mouth. You're probably also not going to get a lot of Google organic. Like our business right now, we're 20 years in, so we get a fair share of our revenue generated from basically free advertising sources. If you're only a year or two into your business, you may have to spend a lot more money on paid sources such as AdWords, Facebook, yard signs, and so on. But how this works for the upcoming year's budget is you would put in exactly what you had spent last year for each advertising source. And then down below here, you're going to put in next year's goals of what you are trying to hit as far as revenue goes. So like last year, you hit 1.26 million. And you want to do another $300,000, you're picking an advertising source up here, and you can pick multiple sources if you want to try to advertise more, allocate more funds in order to hit your revenue goals. So here, if we're going to try to do EDM, a direct mailer, we've kind of figured that's one of the easiest or fastest ways to scale and grow quickly. We're going to spend we want to create an additional $300,000 in revenue from EDDM, which means that we need to spend an additional $30,000. We're probably going to get 200 leads from that, and then that's going to turn into probably 70 acquired customers. All of that information is based on previous year's closing rate, what we had spent and how many leads we had gotten previously. If you're new to business and you don't have any of this data, you can just put stuff in here that you think is going to happen. If you're going to set aside a budget of maybe $10,000 for direct mailers, you can put $10,000 in there. You can talk to the sales rep there and see what kind of lead generation you can expect. Always plan for less than what they tell you, though, because they're trying to sell you a product. So it might be better to talk to other colleagues in the industry to see kind of what's typical for that type of advertising source. But you can still use this first year in business, and it would actually be helpful for you to try to plan for what you're going to spend. Because at the end of the day, the number that you're looking for is your ad budget percentage. So it's 4.69% is what the plan is for this year, or $73,100. Versus if you look at what you spent last year, it could be 4.07%. So the advertising budget is going up by roughly 1% in order for us to get another $300,000 in revenue generated. So if we go over to the overhead here, the advertising budget, 4.69%, $73,100. That's what you would put in there if you're using the ad budget calculator to try to figure out what your ad budget is. And then that's also going to tell you what your total revenue is as a goal. So now that the sheet is pretty much set up for your company, you're going to want to make a copy of this sheet and save it as your master job payout. So that's the sheet you're going to work off of for the entire year. You set up your overhead plans for that year. And then as you get to the end of that year, you're going to make alterations to the master job payout and then work off of that sheet for the following year. So every time we process a job, we make a copy of the master job payout and label it or rename it as the customer's name. So we would make a copy, put in the customer's name here, save it into a customer folder. And when we go over to our schedule here, which the schedule will be available to you as well, this system is how we keep track of our crew's schedule. Estimates the number of weeks out. It keeps track of work order information, job media, communication status, and so on. But if we go down below here, it has a payout, and those payouts are specifically for the customer's name. So Matt Percival would have a payout associated with that, and it's just a copy of the master job payout. All of these projects in the schedule are paid for in full. They're 2021 completed. These are jobs that are currently in the books or on the schedule, and then we have this recently completed area. So if a job goes from in progress to recently completed and we have to pay our employees and our salespeople and project managers, then it's going to go into this area right here, and then we can click on that to see what the payout is and pay people through our payroll provider, which is Gusto. Payout status, these are all going to be 100% because they're recently completed. If a project is in the schedule, in the crew schedule, but it hasn't been completed, however, a pay period has ended with Gusto, with our payroll provider, then we'll mark it as a certain percent complete until it reaches 100%, which we drop it down into this area then. And we know that at that point, we have to pay for the job in full. And once it's paid for, then our admin would drop it down into the 2021 completed area, and that project is pretty much closed out at that point. So speaking of processing a job as a 60% complete, I'll kind of show you what that looks like in the piece rate system. So in this situation, we're going to say actually that this project was 50% completed. However, our payroll period has ended. So we do have to pay our employees a percentage of this job that has been completed. So we're going to go down below here, and if it hasn't been completed yet, then we're not going to pay a bonus simply because we obviously haven't received feedback yet from the job. So this would actually be 0, so we'll just delete that out. We would just say that this is all 0 at this point. So there is no bonus that's available. All this information can stay the same. We'll go down below here. 100%, well, let's say that they worked Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on this project, and then payroll ended, so we have to pay them for whatever is complete up until that point. So let's say that they just worked 24 hours each on this project. That's 100 hours. Well, if you pay them 100% of the project, obviously that you're paying $46 and $35 an hour when they still have a lot left to complete. So you're going to want to mark it as whatever percent complete that they're actually at. So then you're going to pay out 50 hours. And they work 24 hours each, so they're going to make $23 and $17 an hour. My suggestion for anybody using the piece rate system is if a project hasn't been completed, to don't overpay for it on the first payout or the second payout. Don't overpay or don't pay out the bonus until they've completed the project. So if they each work 24 hours, you wouldn't want to process it as 70% complete, because then you're only leaving yourself with 30 hours left when they may actually have 50 hours. So on the next pay period, when you're paying out this job, if they take 50 hours to complete the work and 30 hours has been allowed or what's left over to pay for, they're going to end up making probably below minimum wage. So you'll have to boost up their wage. So my suggestion is to just make sure that you keep that as close as you possibly can to what the actual hours worked. So here you would process this, you would save this file, in our system, we would put it back on the schedule, and then we would mark it as 50% complete. We would pay for this job. And then when it's actually completed, it would go down into that area of the recently completed, and we would pay out the remainder of the job after it's done. And I'll just show you really quick what that looks like to close a project out. So we have this first payout, that's what they made, that's what we paid them for. We have the second payout. Now they finished the job, so we do have a bonus. Let's say that they got a quality bonus of 5 across the board here, and then they also got a Google review, so they did earn a $72 bonus. So in the second payout, we're going to process their bonus hours, and then this very top number is going to be the percentage that's left to pay, including that bonus. So that's why it's kind of a funny number. It's not just 50%. We ended up adding hours, so there's actually 51.5% roughly. So you're going to pay out the remainder of the job, 53 hours here. You had Adam and Tony on the job. And let's just say that they got it done in 20 hours each. So $29 an hour, $22 an hour, and this is closed out. There's no hours left to pay. You can go to the next pay period. Total job hours, 103. Hours already paid, 103. Hours left to pay, 0. So you've paid for the job in full at this point. The last thing I wanted to cover is the overtime sheet. So if we go back to piece rate, we're going to change this to getting completed in one pay period just to make it a little bit simpler. So 45 hours each were worked. Let's say that of those 45 hours that they worked, they had actually worked 85 hours in a pay period, and they had earned or accrued some overtime pay of 5 hours each. So if you go over to the overtime area, you have Adam and Tony. Those are the people that have worked the job and what they are making for the piece rate. And that's how it calculates the overtime pay. So the pay rate is actually $28.95 per hour and $38.59 per hour for every overtime hour work. So we'll just have to put in 5 here for each one of these employees, and that's going to add up overtime pay is $64 and $48 for Adam. The additional overtime cost is $112.57. So if we go over to the commission and job costing sheet, we'll see how that affects the profit margin. So now it's processed as piece rate. It's 49.25 is our gross profit at this point. It does add the overtime labor cost right here. So it went from 49% and what it was without the overtime. We'll just delete that out. Go back. It's 50.1%. So we lowered our gross profit by about 2% or so. We'll go back to the overtime sheet and just put 5 in here again for each one of these guys. Again, 48.64 is additional what you're paying them. So this was the 868 is what you were paying them in the piece rate. So if you go back to piece rate, Adam 868. Now, since you are processing overtime, it's going to add up. So his total pay is 916. So instead of pulling the amount that he's getting paid from the piece rate sheet, you have to pull it from the overtime sheet because this is going to add up his total pay for this project. So that covers how to set up the piece rate system for your business. If you have questions after watching this tutorial video and you need some one-on-one help, after you've made the purchase of the spreadsheet, there's going to be a link where you can schedule a Zoom call with me, and we can do a screen share, and I can guide you through the process of setting this up for your business. And again, we're going to put the scheduling application link in the description below. That is this application right here. And then we're going to put a link to Zoho CRM as well, so you can track your advertising spend and how effective those advertising sources are. I really appreciate you sticking it out and watching this video. I know in total it's probably roughly an hour long. There's just a lot of material that we had to cover here. I can't emphasize enough how important this spreadsheet has been for my business. It's really just about developing a system to pay people and a way to pay people more while maintaining or preserving your gross profit. So it's very easy to go out and spend some money on a piece of equipment that you think is cool, that might make you a little bit more efficient, make you a little bit more money. No amount of equipment that I have personally spent has made as big of a difference as using this spreadsheet to our gross profit and our net profit. So again, huge benefit to us. I hope it's a benefit to you. If you have any questions, please comment below. Liking the video would help us out a ton. And take care.